So in this segment, we're going to be discussing President Macron of France talking about supporting a ceasefire, which 100% I support this. We'll be talking about the leader of the SNP in Westminster, Stephen Flynn, and then we'll be talking about the night towards the end of the video. But this is a pretty cool interview from Macron.
We've had weeks of aid organisations sounding the alarm about Gaza, and so you've now said that humanitarian pauses in fighting aren't enough and there needs to be work towards a ceasefire. Are you disappointed that other world leaders aren't joining you in that call, like the US or the UK?
So at the moment, the Americans have called for they've got these humanitarian pauses, I think it's for 4 hours. I can't remember over how many days, but Macron's kind of gone away from that. But I don't think the French have been always aligned with British and American foreign policy. They weren't aligned, I think, during the Iraq War and multiple other kind of situations. French foreign policy is quite different, which makes sense because France's history is different to the Americans and different to the British to an extent.
No, I hope they will. And let's be clear, I mean, I was one of the first leaders to call the Prime Minister and President of Israel after the terrorist attack, the 7th of October. We clearly condemned this terrorist attack and this terrorist group and recognize the right of Israel to protect itself and react. But day one, we say that this reaction and the fight against terrorism, because it is led by a democracy, should be compliant with international rules, rule of war, and humanitarian international law. And day after day, what we saw is a permanent bombing of civilians in Gaza. And I think it's very important to say the whole story. But I think this is the only solution we have, this ceasefire. Because it's impossible to explain we want to fight against terrorism by killing innocent people.
And that is a point that a lot of people fail to realise. How do you support the fight against terrorism? You say Hamas are a terror group. They kill innocent people. That's what a terrorist group does, right? So how do you fight a terrorist group by killing innocent people? It doesn't work. We saw this stuff in places like Vietnam, this exact kind of war strategy, just dropping bombs endlessly, especially on civilian populations. It doesn't work. And so how do you fight a war when one group has killed innocent people, Hamas, by also killing innocent people indiscriminately? How do you square the circle? It doesn't make sense.
You've talked about the fight against terrorism needing to be merciless, is the word you used, but not without rules. And you've just referred there to the high loss of civilian life in Gaza. Do you think Israel is respecting those rules, the international rules that you're referring to?
Look, in the very first days, it's clear that the emotion, the compassion, created a situation where everybody was just close to Israel and backing them and sharing the pain. And we do share their pain, and we do share the willingness to get rid of terrorism. We know what terrorism means in France.
France has had some of the worst, the scale of the attack on the October 7th and the terrorist attack I think France has faced. I don't think they're very comparable, but France has faced terrorist attacks. I think it might have been Macron that was there in the stadium in around the times one of them actually happened. I think it was he was in the Parc de Paris, the PSG stadium, when there was an active terrorist attack that happened not too far from where he was. And so, he'd be one of the few kind of politicians with some experience of that. Britain is no stranger also terrorist attacks from kind of Muslim radical groups, just like the Americans wouldn't be either. But, France and Britain are also not strangers to attacks by other terror organizations as well. And, the way that these countries kind of have dealt with it is different, I think.
But I think there is no justification precisely to attack civilians.
What I would like just to clarify with you, are you saying that Israel is guilty of breaking international humanitarian law, potential war crimes?
No, I'm here, look, I think it's not the proper way to approach the question. we do recognize their right to protect themselves. And 1 month after this terrorist attack, I think it would be not the right way to deal with a partner and friend, just to say you will be condemned and you are guilty.
And this is where one of the parallels it kind of draws with Russia, where a lot of, I don't know if Macron was one of them, but a lot of Western politicians saying Russia was immediately guilty of war crimes. And I think one of the reasons they haven't done that with Israel is they still think they can talk Israel down from the place they are on of attacking innocent civilians. I think they still think they can get them to walk back across the line that they have crossed, which I don't know under the way of international law. I don't think you can justifiably say that, oh, you've murdered, hundreds, thousands of civilians, but if you stop now, you won't be condemned for that. I can't see a world where you can kind of justify it, if that makes sense. But I guess I can see his point. They see Israel as an ally. They think they can get Netanyahu to kind of walk back from his actions. And I know the Americans are doing this to buy him time, saying stop killing as many civilians. Because as I pointed out before, one of the things that got the Vietnam War so much condemnation in America was the pictures and the footage that the Americans saw, the carnage, the slaughter during the Vietnam War, and it caused a lot of backlash within the United States. So I think that's one of the reasons why America have told Israel to tone it down. But I think Macron's coming from a different place. It feels like maybe he realizes or maybe he's saying what Israel are doing is counterproductive, that you can't be a democracy and attack civilians. You cannot fight people. You cannot fight back against people killing innocent civilians by killing innocent civilians. I know that's not exactly what Macron said. I think this is what he's saying, but again, it's difficult to kind of interpret it without being able to speak with him directly, if that makes sense.
De facto, today, civilians are bombed. De facto. These babies, these ladies, these old people are bombed and killed. There is no reason for that and no legitimacy. So we do urge Israel to stop. I'm not a judge. I'm a head of state. I just remind everybody international law. I call for a ceasefire, and I will urge them for a ceasefire, for a humanitarian ceasefire.
We've had weeks.
And I think, this is where, he's one of the Western leaders who have done, I think, a lot better in terms of trying to uphold international law and trying to talk Israel back from where they are, whereas other countries have kind of encouraged it or tried to limit the optics of it. I think countries like France, I think Spain, Belgium, Ireland, these are the ones I can confirm in my head that have done kind of great things here. There might be others, I think Portugal and maybe a few other countries, but I guess it's going to be very rare for me to say this, right? But put some respect on Macron's name. Put some damn respect on his name, honestly. I think he has done a lot better than a lot of the other kind of party leaders, and we'll be speaking about a few of them. Netanyahu says Macron had made a grave mistake, factual and moral mistake, after criticising civilian deaths. So what Macron said there was very gentle, but you see the immediate response. Saying Macron had made a grave mistake. These are meant to be two countries that are allies. Imagine saying this about an ally, that your ally had made a grave mistake. What kind of friend? What kind of supporter would do that? What kind of person would say that? Especially after you're criticised for civilian deaths. Saying you made a factual mistake, which isn't true, made a moral mistake. That's a different question, up for judgment. But I don't think France have made a moral mistake, but to say they've made a grave mistake, what are you going to do, Netanyahu? How dare you threaten the leader of France, given what you have done? We go to another kind of, he's not party leader, but he's their lead in Westminster, who, the SNP are trying to force a vote within Westminster on opposition day, and I think what they're doing is a good thing. I think Hamza Yousaf has been a lot better on this issue than many other party leaders, especially in the United Kingdom. So let's have a listen to what Stephen Flynn has to say.
We need a ceasefire, and we need it now. And that's why next week, at the very first opportunity, Scottish National Party MPs in Westminster are going to seek to have a vote in the House of Commons. It'll be a vote that will give all members of Parliament the opportunity to say that they stand for international law, that they stand for the protection of civilian life, and that they stand for peace. We all know that Hamas committed abhorrent atrocities on the 7th of October, and we all immediately want the release of the hostages who are still under their control. And all of us, irrespective of party, must unite to condemn the rise of anti-Semitism that we have seen on these isles. And so too must we all unite in stating our unequivocal belief that Israel's response amounts to the collective punishment of the Palestinian people.
Collective punishment is illegal under international law, which is important to remember, and it's one of the reasons why the SNP would be calling for a ceasefire.
The decision to cut off water, food, electricity, fuel, medicines from a civilian population in its millions cannot be justified. The fact that schools, universities and hospitals no longer exist cannot be justified. And that's why the majority of Scottish people back our stance. That's why 76% of people across these isles back our stance.
So it's not only the backing of the people in Scotland, but also the backing really of the people in the United Kingdom. I think the vast majority of people in Britain support the ceasefire. I think that's why he's talking about the 76 figure. It's not people just in Scotland, it's people in, I think, the United Kingdom back a ceasefire. And so the SNP are calling for it. It does put Labour in a very awkward spot because of what the Knight has said, and we'll be discussing that in a minute. But I think what the SNP are doing here is ultimately a good thing. I know they're going to get criticism because they're like, oh, they're just playing party politics. But it's like, if doing the right thing and playing party politics, if you can do those two at the same time, then I think your criticism is mostly illegitimate unless you're questioning the intent of the people doing this. And given the fact that Hamza Yousaf has called for a ceasefire very early on, given the amount of civilian deaths and the collective punishment, I would struggle to see anyone criticise the SNP's intent on this specific issue. And then we go on to the Knight, which is this from Cathy Newman, saying, quote, in other reshuffle news, a UK Labour source tells me that up to 17 frontbenchers expect to be sacked on Wednesday for backing SNP on the Gaza ceasefire vote. They say unless Keir Starmer uses the words immediate ceasefire, they can't vote with Labour and expect to be fired, end quote. So we'll have to see what Starmer does. He could offer a free vote, but I think this is kind of people within the front bench telling Starmer that they expect about 17 of them having to be sacked, and that would be incredibly embarrassing for Starmer to have to do, given the week Rishi Sunak's had. Rishi Sunak's had such a bad week that he's had to bring in unelected bureaucrat, former Prime Minister David Cameron, to become Foreign Secretary. So this would be incredibly stupid for Starmer to do. I think he should go for a free vote, and he should say, like, different people within the party can have different views on this specific issue. Generally that's the coward's move, but it's also the much safer option. It just depends on what he's thinking, because this is a chance for him to get rid of certain members of the front bench if he wants to clear house. But he did do a reshuffle fairly recently. The key question will be, will they keep the whip if they back this motion? That's going to be another question. But we have seen, I think, one or two front benches leave already, and having to reshuffle around 17 members is not going to be the most pleasant experience, especially given the lack of talent within the Labour Party as well. So yeah, from two leaders who are parties that have done, I think, who've said the right things. You can say, oh, they're saying the right things because you agree with them. That's what makes them the right things. But I think morally they've said the right things. I know I clown France and Macron probably a bit too much. Maybe I should put some respect on France's name, despite the fact that I don't like the accent. But given Macron is seemingly, apart from the pension stuff, I think he's doing some good stuff for France, at least better than what Labour would do or Sunak would do. So yeah, maybe I should put some respect on his name. But good response from France, good response from the SNP, poor response from Labour. And I think I'll try and look into what other world leaders are saying about the conflict, because some of the Latin American countries have cut off diplomatic relations with Israel as well. So we'll have to keep an eye on it further. But if you do want me to look at other countries' responses, just put it in the comments and I'll try and find out what's going on and what other world leaders are saying. But anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And yeah, shocking to say, put some respect on Macron's name. And I'll catch you in the next one.